Have you ever wondered why you care so much about what others think of you? Why a single critical comment can ruin your entire day? Why you sometimes make choices not because they feel right, but because they'll make others happy? Look at your life right now. How many decisions have you made because you genuinely wanted to make them? And how many were influenced by your fear of disapproval? The job you chose, the clothes you wear, the relationships you maintain, even the opinions you express. How much of this is truly you, and how much is a performance for others? Alfred Adler, one of the three giants of psychology alongside Freud and Jung, discovered something profound about human nature. We are not driven primarily by past experiences or unconscious desires, but by our goals and social connections. And one of the greatest obstacles to our happiness is our desperate need for approval. The truth is uncomfortable, but liberating. Your need to be liked is a prison you've built around yourself. A prison with invisible walls that limits where you go, what you say, how you act, and ultimately who you become. And the most frightening part? You don't even realize you're imprisoned. Adler proposed something revolutionary. True freedom comes from the courage to be disliked, not from seeking everyone's approval or validation, but from accepting that disapproval is inevitable when you live according to your own convictions. This isn't about becoming deliberately offensive or inconsiderate. It's about reclaiming your authentic self from the clutches of others' expectations. In this video, we're going to explore why we become so entangled in seeking approval, how it damages our lives and relationships, and most importantly, how to develop the courage to be disliked. Not so you can antagonize others, but so you can finally live as your true self. The journey won't be easy, but freedom rarely is. Are you ready to begin? From the moment you were born, you learned that approval equals safety. When you cried and someone comforted you, when you smiled and received a smile in return, these experiences taught you that being accepted by others is essential for survival. And in our earliest years, it absolutely was. But something happens as we grow. This natural need for connection transforms into something darker, an addiction to approval. We begin to measure our worth by how others perceive us. We develop what Adler called an inferiority complex, a persistent feeling that we're not enough, that we must constantly prove ourselves worthy of acceptance. Think about how many times you've stayed silent when you wanted to speak up, how often you've agreed when you actually disagreed, how frequently you've altered your appearance, your opinions, your very identity, just to avoid the pain of disapproval. Each time you sacrificed a piece of yourself on the altar of social acceptance. The most insidious part? This trap convinces you that seeking approval is the path to happiness. That if you can just make everyone like you, you'll finally feel content. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. The truth is exactly the opposite. The more desperately you seek approval, the more miserable you become. Why? Because approval seeking creates three devastating problems in your life. First, it makes you inauthentic. You become so focused on presenting the right image that you lose touch with your genuine self. You develop a false persona that feels increasingly empty and exhausting to maintain. Second, it gives control of your happiness to others. When your self-worth depends on others' opinions, you surrender the keys to your emotional well-being. You become like a leaf in the wind, blown in whatever direction others' judgments take you. Third, it makes rejection unbearable. When being liked is everything, being disliked becomes catastrophic. A single criticism can destroy your confidence because you've made approval the measure of your value. I see this pattern play out daily in my practice. Clients who are successful by external standards but feel hollow inside. People who have achieved everything society told them would bring fulfillment, yet still feel unfulfilled. They come seeking happiness, but what they really need is liberation from the prison of others' expectations. Adler recognized this pattern a century ago. He saw that most human suffering stems not from past traumas or biological drives, but from how we navigate our relationships with others. And at the heart of this suffering is the fear of being disliked, a fear that controls us far more than we realize. In the next section, we'll explore why this fear exists and how it operates in your daily life. Because understanding the mechanism of your prison is the first step toward breaking free. In the next part of our journey, let's explore the origin of this fear that holds us captive. Adlerian psychology offers a radical perspective on human motivation. While Freud saw us as driven by past experiences and hidden desires, Adler believed we are primarily goal-oriented beings, and one of our most powerful goals is belonging. This desire to belong is not a weakness, it's fundamentally human. We evolved as social creatures, dependent on our communities for survival. Being rejected by the tribe once meant almost certain death. Your brain still carries this ancient programming, which is why rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. But here's where things get interesting. Adler recognized that we often develop unhealthy strategies to achieve this sense of belonging. Instead of forming genuine connections based on mutual respect, we adopt what he called mistaken lifestyles, patterns of behavior aimed at securing our place in the social order. The most common mistaken lifestyle? People-pleasing. The belief that if you can make everyone happy, if you can avoid all conflict, if you can become what others want you to be, then you'll finally be accepted and loved. Think about a recent situation where you compromised your values or desires to avoid disapproval. Perhaps you agreed to plans you didn't want to attend. Maybe you stayed in a relationship that wasn't serving you. Or perhaps you pursued a career path your parents approved of rather than following your passion. In that moment, what were you really afraid of? It wasn't just disapproval itself. It was what disapproval represented. The threat of isolation, of being cast out, of losing your sense of belonging. This fear runs so deep that most of us will sacrifice almost anything to avoid it. We'll endure unfulfilling careers, toxic relationships, and living by others' values, all to escape the perceived danger of disapproval. But Adler identified the tragic irony in this approach. The more you try to please others, the less you please yourself. And eventually, this leads to resentment, burnout, and a profound sense of alienation from your own life. Even worse, your attempts to make everyone like you are ultimately doomed to fail. Why? Because human approval is fundamentally uncontrollable. No matter how perfectly you behave, no matter how much you contort yourself to meet others' expectations, someone will still dislike you. This is the brutal truth that most people spend their lives avoiding. Universal approval is impossible. There are over 7 billion people on this planet, each with their own values, preferences, and perspectives. The mathematical probability of pleasing everyone is precisely 0. And yet, how much of your energy is still directed toward this impossible goal? How often do you sacrifice your authentic self on the altar of an unattainable ideal? Adler proposed a radical alternative. What if, instead of seeing disapproval as something to be feared, we recognized it as the inevitable consequence of living according to our own convictions? What if we understood that being disliked by some people is not a failure, but a sign that we're living authentically? This shift in perspective doesn't happen overnight. It requires a fundamental reevaluation of how you view relationships, community, and your own worth. Now, let's explore a concept that can fundamentally change how you approach relationships and personal freedom. One of Adler's most liberating concepts is the separation of tasks. This deceptively simple idea has the power to transform your relationships and free you from the burden of others' expectations. The principle is this: in every relationship, there are tasks that belong to you and tasks that belong to others. Your task is to be yourself authentically and to respect others. Their task is to decide how they feel about you. When you try to control how others perceive you, when you take on their tasks, you enter an impossible struggle that can only lead to frustration and self-betrayal. Let me illustrate this with a simple example. Imagine you express an opinion that differs from your friends. Your task is to express your view honestly and respectfully. Their task is to decide how they respond. If they become upset, that's their task to manage, not yours. When you take responsibility for their emotional reaction, when you twist yourself into knots trying to prevent their disapproval, you've crossed the boundary into their territory. This confusion of tasks lies at the heart of approval-seeking behavior. We believe it's our job to manage others' perceptions of us, to ensure they always approve. But this is a task that doesn't belong to us, and attempting to control it only leads to misery. Adler saw this clearly. When we try to take on others' tasks, we not only exhaust ourselves, we actually prevent them from taking responsibility for themselves. We create codependent relationships where neither party can be authentic. The separation of tasks gives you permission to exist as your authentic self without the crushing responsibility of managing everyone else's reactions. It's not selfish, it's the foundation of healthy relationships. Only when both parties respect the boundary between their tasks can genuine connection occur. But implementing this principle requires courage. You must be willing to let others have their own reactions, even negative ones. You must trust that disapproval, while uncomfortable, will not destroy you. This is the courage to be disliked, the willingness to be judged by others without letting that judgment define your worth. If this sounds frightening, it's because it challenges one of your deepest fears, the fear of rejection. But consider the alternative. When you live in constant anxiety about others' approval, when you contort yourself to avoid criticism, are you really living at all? Or are you merely existing as a reflection of others' expectations? The courage to be disliked doesn't emerge overnight. It develops gradually as you practice the separation of tasks in your daily life. Let's move to the practical side and explore how you can begin cultivating this courage. Let's now look at some practical steps you can take to develop the courage to be disliked. These aren't quick fixes. They're practices that, over time, will help you break free from the prison of seeking approval. First, start noticing when you're taking on others' tasks. Pay attention to those moments when you feel responsible for someone else's feelings or reactions. Ask yourself, is this actually my task, or am I crossing a boundary? This awareness alone can begin to shift your perspective. Next, practice expressing your genuine opinions in low-stakes situations. You don't need to start with the most controversial topics or the most difficult people in your life. Begin with small truths in safe environments. Notice how it feels to speak authentically without filtering yourself through the lens of potential approval. Another powerful practice is to intentionally sit with the discomfort of being disliked. The next time someone disapproves of you, whether through direct criticism or subtle indicators like a disapproving look, resist the urge to immediately fix the situation. Don't apologize when you've done nothing wrong. Don't backtrack on your authentic expression. Instead, Breathe into the discomfort and remind yourself, I can survive this feeling. Their disapproval does not diminish my worth. Adler also emphasized the importance of contributing to others, not to gain approval, but from a genuine desire to add value to the community. This might seem contradictory, but it's actually profound. When you contribute without seeking validation, you experience a sense of belonging that doesn't depend on others' perceptions of you. Consider developing what Adler called social interest, a genuine concern for the welfare of others and the community. This isn't people-pleasing. It's recognizing your connection to humanity without making your self-worth contingent on others' approval. When you contribute from this place, you simultaneously fulfill your need for belonging and maintain your autonomy. It's also essential to surround yourself with people who respect your authenticity, even when they disagree with you. Look for relationships where disagreement doesn't threaten connection, where you can express different views without either person feeling rejected. These relationships provide the safety you need as you develop the courage to be disliked in more challenging contexts. Finally, remember that this is a lifelong practice. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when the fear of disapproval overwhelms you, when you find yourself contorting to please others. When this happens, treat yourself with compassion. Notice the pattern, recommit to your authentic path, and continue moving forward. The path to freedom from others' expectations isn't linear. It's a spiral where you continuously return to the same challenges with greater awareness and capacity. Each time you choose authenticity over approval seeking, you strengthen the muscle of courage. Each time you respect the separation of tasks, you reclaim a piece of your authentic self. As we move toward the conclusion of our exploration, let's examine what life looks like when you've developed the courage to be disliked. When you've broken free from the prison of seeking approval and started living according to your own convictions. When you develop the courage to be disliked, an extraordinary transformation begins. The energy you once spent managing others' perceptions becomes available for creative expression, meaningful connection, and genuine purpose. The mental space occupied by anxiety over potential disapproval clears, making room for curiosity, presence, and joy. Relationships transform as well. When you stop trying to control how others perceive you, you create space for authentic connection. Paradoxically, the relationships that matter most often deepen when you stop people-pleasing. Why? Because genuine connection can only occur between authentic individuals. When you show up as your true self, you allow others to know and love the real you, not just the carefully curated version designed to avoid disapproval. Some relationships may end or change dramatically. Those built primarily on your willingness to contort yourself to others' expectations may not survive your newfound authenticity. This can be painful, but it makes space for connections that nourish rather than deplete you. Your relationship with yourself transforms most profoundly. The constant internal critic, the voice always worried about how others might judge you, gradually quiets. In its place emerges a sense of inner peace, a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're living according to your own values rather than others' expectations. Decision-making becomes clearer. Without the fog of anticipated disapproval clouding your judgment, you can see more clearly what you actually want and take steps to create it. Career changes, geographic moves, relationship shifts that once seemed unthinkable become possible when you're no longer held captive by the fear of others' reactions. This doesn't mean you become selfish or inconsiderate. In fact, the opposite often occurs. When you're no longer acting from the fearful, approval-seeking part of yourself, your natural compassion and generosity can flow more freely. Your contributions to others come from genuine care rather than the need for validation, making them more authentic and often more impactful. Perhaps most importantly, you reclaim your personal authority. Instead of living by others' rules and expectations, you develop your own philosophy of life, your own values and principles that guide your choices. This is what Adler called the courage to be unpopular. It's the willingness to stand by your convictions even when they don't align with societal expectations or win you immediate approval. Is this path easy? No. Will you sometimes fail, falling back into old patterns of seeking approval? Absolutely. The courage to be disliked isn't something you achieve once and forever. It's a practice you return to daily, a muscle you strengthen through consistent use. But with each choice to honor your authentic self, with each moment of standing in your truth, even when it doesn't win you approval, you expand your freedom. You loosen the chains of others' expectations. You reclaim pieces of yourself that were sacrificed on the altar of acceptance. And eventually, you discover something remarkable. The disapproval you so feared loses its power over you. Not because it doesn't happen, it still does, but because you no longer see it as a threat to your worth or belonging. You recognize it simply as the inevitable consequence of living as your authentic self in a world of diverse perspectives and values. This is the ultimate liberation that Adler's psychology offers. Not freedom from disapproval, but freedom from the fear of disapproval. Not universal acceptance, but the deep self-acceptance that makes others' opinions less defining. Not a life without conflict or challenge, but a life of authenticity, purpose, and genuine connection. The question now is yours. Are you ready to begin this journey? Are you willing to develop the courage to be disliked? The prison door is unlocked. The first step through it begins with a simple choice: to value your authenticity more than others' approval. Start small. Practice expressing your genuine thoughts in a low-stakes situation today. Notice when you're taking on others' tasks and gently return to your own. And remember that this journey isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning and people-pleasing. If this video resonated with you, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. How has the fear of disapproval shaped your life? What small step could you take today toward greater authenticity? Your journey may inspire others to find their own courage. And don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to explore more ideas that challenge conventional thinking and support your personal growth. Until next time, remember, the courage to be disliked may be the most liberating choice you ever make.